Hey guys, this is your lesson for our next thing, solving two-step equations. So we're going to be solving two-step equations. These two-step equations involve doing two things at one time, doing two things not at one time, but you're taking two steps, whereas one-step equation you only did one step. So it's a little bit different, but it's basically the same thing. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to undo some things as we move forward. So our first steps of what we're going to do is we're going to have to be able to use and be able to solve and find our variable, which is our letter. So that's our first thing. And then we're going to be able to identify what our operations are doing. Then after we do that, we use our undoing, which is helping here for you, such as like this. These two things. So we're going to undo any adding and subtracting first. And then last but not least, our second step will be multiplying or dividing last. So we have two steps that we do. So our first step will be this one. Our second step will be to undo any multiplying and multiplying and dividing. And I'm going to show you how to use an organizer too to help you be able to find these things as you go forward. So it's the same thing as you can do to be able to show your work. So there's a couple examples here that I want to do with you so that you can be able to see how we process these as we move forward. So here's your first example. It says 2 times t plus 3 is equal to 11. So that's 2 times t plus 3 equals 11. Now this is a two-step problem because you have a 3 that's being added to something that's multiplying by the variable that we want to solve for. So we're solving for t. We want to know what t is. Okay, so our first step of what we have to do is we're going to set up an organizer here. It's a 3-column method that's going to help you be able to solve these. So I'm going to make it out right here, and I'm going to abbreviate them, but I'm going to write it out for you so you can see it. So there's what we have. We have our start, our change, and our finish. That's our 3-column method to help us organize so that we know which to move first. And everything that we do is we're going to move everything to the finish side. And the finish side is what we use to put into our calculator. Now the finish side is what the equation equals. So if you look here, the equation is equaling an 11. So that's why the 11 goes into the finish. The start value is just the number without the variable. So the number without the variable here is 3. And what type of 3 is happening here? What operation? It's a plus. My change is the variable. So you can also almost just call this the variable or the part that's with it. So the part that's with my change or my variable here is the 2t. So the 2t is my change. I'm going to highlight that here. Use pink here for you so you can see that. That whole thing, 2 times t is your change. Now I can go about, I have my organizer set up and I can go about solving. And just like I told you, we're going to move everything to the finish. And we just go with our first column, the start column, we move them first by doing the opposite or the inverse. And then we move the change column over by doing the opposite or the inverse. So the first thing we do here is we're going to start with this one. So this is a plus 3. So the opposite of plus 3, to move him over here, would be a minus 3. Those cancel out to 0. And so your left here is 11 take away 3, which gives you 8. So now you still have 2t in the change column, which we haven't moved, and we have an 8 now in our finish. So now this just becomes a one-step problem. 2t, 2 times t is equal to 8. Well, how do you get rid of something that's being multiplied? Well, we know that we have to divide. So we're dividing by 2, I'm sorry. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so those go away. And all you're left with is the letter t that we want to solve for. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that would be our solution right there. 4 would be our answer. It's pretty straightforward as you do this if you set it up as you go forward. So here's your second example. Let's take a look at that one. The same thing here. This is saying 5 times x minus 11 is equal to negative 16. Well, the variable in this case is x. So I'm going to solve for x. I'm trying to find out what x is. So let's set up our organizer, and I'm going to abbreviate the start, change, and finish with an SCF. And remember, my finish is what it equals. So it equals a negative 16. It's at the very end. I'm starting with an 11. But what type of 11 is it? It's a negative 11. So the negative 11 goes in here. And then my change is the 5x. It goes all in here. 5x. That is my change. That's what's changing that x values by 5. And so I got to do my steps. Start to finish, and then move the change to the finish. And all I want to be left with is just one little x. So to start this here, I have up minus 11. So what do I do when I take to get rid of a minus 11 to move it to my finish? I'm going to add it. And then add 11 on both sides. And when I do that, negative 11 plus 11 is 0. Those go away. And all you're left with here is negative 16 plus 11. Put it in your calculator if you need that. Negative 16 plus 11 is negative 5. So I'm done so far. But remember, it takes 2 steps. So I've done 1 step so far. This was my first step. Now I got to do my second step. My second step is to move this 5 that's being multiplied over here to this side. Because now I have a 1-step equation. I have 5 times x equals negative 5. So the opposite of times is dividing. Divide that by 5. Divide this by 5. Remember, it's not 5x I'm dividing by. I'm dividing by the coefficient 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So you're left with the x, what I wanted. And then I just do this part. This is my second step. Negative 5 divided by 5, which just gives me negative 1. And I'm done with that question. Simple as that. So my answer there would be x is equal to negative 1. We have solved for my x value. Okay? So far, so good, I hope. Just use your organizer, set it up, and you'll be able to rock and roll through this. Here's number 3. This is a different type of problem. You can see it says x divided by 2 minus 2 is equal to 5. So I need to make sure that I'm solving for my variable is x. I'm solving for this x value right here. So I just need to set up my organizer so I can be able to know my process or my 2 steps that I'm going to do. Start, change, and finish. Remember, the finish is what it equals, so it's equaling 5. My start value is always just the number by itself. And so the number by itself here is this right there. Is a 2. But what type of 2 is it? It's a minus 2, so I'm going to put a minus there. So that's my start. Remember, your change is the part that has the variable or the letter. So that's the x over 2, which means division. X divided by 2. And so I'm good to go now. I have it set up, and now I can perform my 2 steps to be able to solve this. So remember, my first step is to move the start value over to the finish. So I got to move the 2, and it's a minus. So I do the opposite, or the inverse of a minus 2 is plus. So those go away. That goes to 0, so I'm done with that. And 5 plus 2 is 7. So that's my first step right there. But remember, these are two-step equations, and I have one more step to do here in my change. This is 2 steps, so I need to make sure to get this taken care of. So I do x divided by 2, so I need to know what is the opposite of division to get rid of that 2. So I can just have x by itself. So the opposite of division is multiply. So I'm multiplying by a 2, and I'm multiplying by a 2 here. These 2's cancel out, and you're left with an x is going to be equal to 7 times 2, and 7 times 2 is 14. So we have our solution there. So there's my second step right there. When I multiplied, move that 2 over here, so I have x is equal to 14. And I'm good to go with that one. That's it. So my first step was to move the negative 2 over by adding, and then to move the 2 over by multiplying because it's dividing, and I'm done with my 2-step equation. All right. Example 4, we're going to do a little change to it. I'm going to change this problem here. So we're going to mark that out. We're going to put 10x minus 5 is equal to, let's go with another 15. Okay. We're going to write that one down. We're going to not deal with the fractions here. But it's the same process that we need to do here. We need to find out what we're solving for. We're solving for the variable x. And to solve for the variable x, we're just going to set up my organizer so I know I have my steps down so I can be able to solve a 2-step problem. Start, change, and finish. Now remember, the finish is what it equals. So it's equaling a 15. Remember, your finish is always what it equals. So wherever it says, see the equal sign and just a single number there's the finish. So what is my start value? Well, my start value is a 5. It's just a plain number. But what type of 5 is it? It's a minus 5. My last step that I need to fill in my organizer is my change. That's everything with the variable. So that's 10 times x. 10 times x. Now I have my my organizer set up, and now I can just be able to do my 2 steps and solve. I'm going to take the start over to the finish, and then my second step will be the change to the finish. So remember, your first step is either add or subtract, so I got to do the opposite of subtraction in my start, which would be a plus. These cancel out to 0, so I'm done with those. And now I just do this part right here. 15 plus 5 is 20. So that was my first step. Now I need to do my second step. My second step, remember, is to take the change. That's either divide or multiply. So in this case, it's being multiplied. 10 times x. So what's the opposite of multiplication? Division. I'm going to divide this, move the 10 over to my finish by dividing just the 10, not the x, because that's what I want to solve for. These 10s go away, they cancel out. So all I'm left with is an x. And if I divide this side by 10, remember I moved this 10 over to my finish, I end up finding my x is going to be equal to 2. 10 goes into 20 2 times. So I have completed 4 examples here using my organizer with 2-step equations. Now I want you to be able to set this up the same way. Notice that these are 2-step equations because you have 3 terms. You have the variable which has a coefficient with it. A variable has a coefficient with it. A variable that has a coefficient with it. And a variable that has a coefficient with it. So these are 2-step equations. These aren't 1-step equations. So that's why it takes 2 steps to do. So if you use your organizer to help you set up, you should be able to get those completed. So you have 4 examples here on the back if you use those. Use your organizer, set those things up, look at what you're trying to solve for. So remember on this one, we're solving for y. In this case, we'll make this a positive y here. We're solving here for an x. This one here, we're going to solve for the x. And in this one, we're going to solve for the y. So all you have to do is set your organizer up, and you're ready to rock and roll. So it's very simple to do. So if you set these things up with your start, change, and finish, here's your finish is 20. My change is an 8. What type of 8 is it? It's a positive 8. What type of change do I have? There's my change right there. My change is a minus negative 3x. So now I'm good to go, and I have it all set up, and I can solve these problems and go from what I need to do. So remember, I'm moving the start over to the finish. Goes away to 0. 20 minus 8 is 22. Sorry, not 22, 12. And you have your negative 3x left over. Well, how do we get rid of a negative 3x times x? So this is multiplication. It's negative 3 times x. So remember, we're going to do the opposite of that, which is divide by negative 3 and divide by negative 3, which gives me my value x. X by itself. When I get that, I get negative 4. That is my solution there. So it's very tricky when you see these. Okay. The next one that you have as well, we'll set these up here and then see if you can solve them. So if I do my start, change, and finish here for these, my finish is 16, because that's what it equals. My change is a 2x, and it's negative 2 times x. Take the sign with it. And my start value is a 2. What type of 2 is it? It's plus. So I know I'm going to be doing some subtraction. I'll let you solve that one. It's set up for you. So now if we look over here at the next one, we're going to set this one up. Start, change, and finish. What does this problem equal? Equals that, negative 11. Those are my finish. What is my starting value? It's just the number. What is the number? It's negative 1. What is my change? My change is the thing that goes with the variable. So I take the sign too. It's a negative 5. Negative 5 times y. So remember, if you set it up there just like it is, you can now be able to begin to solve it. Okay? Now the only one I did not set up for you that you have there for you is example 5. So we can set that one up here real quick, and then you can solve these, and you ask Mr. O and I'll check it for you. So you have it set up, start, change, and finish. My finish here is a negative 1. My change goes with everything with the y. So it's y divided by 4. So remember, this is division. Y divided by 4. And then my start value is just the number 6. What's the sign with 6? It's a positive 6. Remember to always take the sign with the number that you have. That's why this was a negative 3, because that was a minus 3 times x. That's why this was a negative 2, because that was a negative 2 times x. Take the sign. This was a negative 5, because take the sign. Negative 5 times y. Negative 1, because there's the sign in front of it. So you have 3 here that are already set up for you. Do through your steps. See if you can solve that. When you get finished with those, I have a worksheet that you can work on by practicing and setting up these problems for you. Okay? Thank you very much.